The topic for today is Omega T. So Omega T is a computer application that you can download and install on your computer. So it's different from SmartCat, which was or which is an application that you run in the browser. So there you have to create an account, log in, and then when using it, you need an internet connection. When you install Omega T, it runs on your computer, so you don't have to be logged in, you don't have to have an internet connection when using it. So this is a classic program that you download and install. And in fact, you don't even need to install it. You can just download it and run it from a folder, which is perhaps not recommended for most people. But we'll look at that. So you need to press the download button and you go to the download page. And then when you scroll down, you can see you've got quite a few different versions. So first of all, you've got the standard version and you've got the latest version. So there isn't much difference, or at least you won't see much difference. But in general, it's a good idea to just use the standard version, because you won't be using any very advanced functionality, so you probably won't see the difference anyway. And the standard version is a little bit more stable. So here you've got different platforms. So you've got Windows, you've got OS X, so for Macs, and you've got a Linux version, and you've got a cross-platform version. So this is a version that you can run on any computer, assuming you've got Java installed on it. So I was talking about running it without installing it. So that would be the option. But for most people, I suppose, if you have a Windows computer, you would just select one of these. If you have a Mac, then of course you would select one of these. I don't know what the difference is between the two here. There is an explanation. Yes, so you can just read it. There doesn't seem to be much difference. And of course, if someone is running Linux, you can just download it or just use your package manager. But I don't know if there are any people running Linux in the group. So, and anyway, Linux people usually know how to install an application. So, right. So the question is, which of these versions for Windows should you install? Because you've got Windows with JRE, that's one version, Windows with 64-bit JRE, and Windows without JRE. So JRE is the Java runtime environment. So basically that's Java. The question is, do you have Java installed on your computer? And you can easily check. You can just go to the Start menu and search, or just look through your applications and see if you've got Java, because it should be there if it's installed. So I can't show you because I'm running Linux here, and it works a little differently. So you should be able to find out. And even if you're unsure, if you can't find whether you've got Java or not, if you download the version with JRE, that won't be a problem, except that you'll download a bigger file unnecessarily, because it's already got Java with it. So Yes, so if you've got a modern computer, then you should probably use the 64-bit version here. And if you want to experiment a little bit, or you don't want to install an application on your computer but just run it, then you could use this cross-platform version. So this version will run on any computer, provided that the Java environment is installed, because it runs in this environment, and this environment is the same on each system, basically. Okay, so I've got the application running here, and I actually have the latest version. But as I said, it doesn't really matter. You will have exactly the same, or you will see exactly the same. So the interface is a bit old-fashioned, perhaps. If you want to change the font or the size of the font, so I've already changed it because it was too small on my computer. But you've got the options here. So you can just go to the options, preferences, and here under appearance, you've got font, which you can change. So you can change the size of the font. So you can see the preview here. So this is size 18, which is what I've got here. Unfortunately, this only changes these windows or these panes, not this one, which is the main window. But I think when we actually have a text loaded in and we're working on the text, these fonts should be the same. I mean, they should also be larger. Okay, so you can see that we've got these three windows or three panes. One is, it's called Instant Start now, but this is actually where the document will be loaded. So then you'll have something different here. Probably the name of the document. Then you've got fuzzy matches. So this strange expression refers basically to the translation memory that will be used here. So you can see the explanation. Displays the translation memory's segments that match the source segment. Matches can be found in your current translation or in the TMX files that you have put in the TM folder. So we'll look at that later. So in the same way as in SmartCat, the translation memories are automatically created when you translate your document, but you can also put external translation memory files or TMX files in a special folder. So in SmartCat, there was a folder where you uploaded those files or you downloaded them from there. Here you will have a folder on your computer in the project folder called TM, where you will put your translation memory files, or where those files will actually be created when translating a text. Right, and here at the bottom you can see we've got a glossary pane. And of course, it displays the glossary entries found in the glossary files located in the Glossary folder. So there will be another folder called Glossary where you will put your glossary files. And we'll also look at that. Right, so you can create your glossaries. So basically there are two ways. You can create them while translating. So you can add words from your text into the glossary by providing translations, or you can put a file with your terms, so a glossary file, into that folder, and it will be used. So we'll do that as well. And we will actually transform a sample file from your glossary project, so the Excel or Calc file, the spreadsheet file, we'll transform it, or we will save it as a glossary file which can be used here. And here at the bottom, you can see we've got some more options or some more tools. We've got a dictionary, we've got machine translation, which we can also use. And when we click on those, you can see that these very narrow windows appear, but you can also just drag them. So basically, you can customize the appearance of this application, of this whole window. Let me maximize the whole thing because you don't need to be staring at the desktop. So that way we have a little more space here. So you've got things like comments, notes, multiple translations. I'm not sure how to use that, but you've got all these extra tools which you can add to the main window, right? So you can maximize them or you can minimize. So basically they're all minimized here. So we're going to work with these three panes, these three windows, because that's all we need for now. The glossary, the translation memory, and the window, the translation window. So let's start a new project. So we need to go to Project, New, and we need a folder which will also be the name of the project. So you can see I've got a project called Project 1, and it's actually a folder, but Omega T recognizes that it contains the project files because you've got this icon next to it. So we're going to create a new one. So for that, we need to create a new folder. So let's create a new folder, and I'm going to call it First Aid, because the text we're going to translate, or at least start translating, is about first aid. Right. So you can see that the folder name is displayed here. So basically that's enough. You can also enter this folder, but it's not really necessary as long as this name shows here. So let's save it. And you're greeted with this window. So of course, you need to select the source language. And I've got the source and the target language selected already because I selected them previously. But you might see something different here at the beginning. So of course you need to select. Actually, this is not selected correctly because we're going to translate from English to Polish, at least for this project. So I'm going to select English, and it's going to be British English. And the target language is, of course, going to be Polish. Okay. So that's all you need to do here. If you look at this section, this area here, you've got all these file locations. So you can see here that you've got the source files folder. You've got the translation memory folder, which was mentioned earlier, right? So it is in your project folder and it's called TM. Of course, you could theoretically change it, but there's no reason to really change it. So you should have all these folders in your project folder. So you've got the translation memory folder, you've got the glossary folder, you've got the writable glossary file, which is the glossary or the file in the glossary folder where your new terms will be written if you decide to define some or translate some terms while translating the text. You also have a dictionary folder and the target folder. So this is where your translation will land when you decide to save it. Okay, so we click OK, and then we've got another window where we can copy the source files to the source folder. So basically that's where we would select the file that we want to work with, that we want to translate. However, we don't have that file yet. We're going to create it in a moment. So that's not a problem because we can do it later. Because what this does is basically just copying that file into that source folder. So we don't have to do it here. We can just do it in the file manager later, right? So I'm going to close this. And of course, the project is open, but there is no source. So let's get the source. So this is the text we're going to use for our demonstration purposes. So this is the website of the NHS, the National Health Service in Britain. And the address is nhs.uk/conditions/first-aid with a hyphen. So I'm going to copy this text into a Word document because we need a document to be used with Omega T. So I'm going to start selecting here because I don't need these links, and of course I can add the title later. So I'm going to quickly select the whole text. That's pretty long. And you can see that we don't have any images, any advertisements, any such rubbish. So this is quite easy. I'm going to stop here because I don't need these items. And I'm going to Control-C. And I need to start a word editor or a text editor. So this is an application called TextMaker, but as you can see, it's quite similar to Microsoft Word. And actually, I'm going to use a newer version, which I've got here. Looks a little nicer. Right, so I've pasted the text. And of course, we've got all these extra new lines, I think, although here actually we don't have any new lines, so that's okay. These are just gaps. So the text is pretty consistent. There is this new page here. Right, and the problem is that when I try to move this text up, it just goes up line by line. So let's not do that. I mean, this one separate page with this heading or with this introduction, that's not a problem, I suppose. So omega t will ignore these extra new lines, I think, anyway. Okay, so we need to save the text. So I'm going to save it as first aid, not a spreadsheet, but a docx document, a Microsoft Word document. Okay, and now we could, of course, open omega t and copy the files through omega t, but we can just as well copy this file directly into the correct folder. So I keep my project here in the cat folder, omega t projects, first aid, and we've got the source folder here. So I can just drag and move the file here. And now when I open omega t, and I open the recent project, you can see that I've got my text here. Right? So I don't need to copy the files because I've got the file here. And by the way, I'm going to close this project for a moment because I forgot to mention this screen, this startup screen that you saw before. So of course, this gives you some basic information about how to use this software, how to set up a project, how to go about translating the file. So you can see you've got some keyboard shortcuts, which we will talk about in a moment. You've got some information about using tags, how to generate a translated file, and a few more things to remember. So I encourage you to read this. So I'm going to reopen the project. And you can see that we've got this text divided into segments, the same way that SmartCat divided those texts into segments. So basically these are sentences or headings. So you can see, for example, what to do. That's a heading in the text. And we have a lot of these lists and headings here. So they will be translated separately. But of course you can see that the first line here, the first segment, is highlighted in this green color. So that means that this is the active segment. This is the actual sentence or phrase we're working on. And you can also see that this text is copied below. It's duplicated below. So the idea is that you would change this other sentence or replace it with the translation. So if you like working in that way, you can just work like that. Another possibility is to go to options here at the top and preferences, and then go to Editor, and you can see that you've got this option here, insert the source text. So the source text is inserted into the translation area. So if you prefer just to type without replacing the original text, then you would select this other option, which I think I'll do because I would rather work that way. Okay. So this still shows because I'm currently working on it. So it's here, but if I select the next one, you can see that there's nothing except segment number. And if I go back, this duplicated text is not here. So we can just type here. So of course you translate by typing your text. So in in SmartCat, there was a shortcut, but there was also this tick icon or tick symbol where you confirmed the translation. So here, if you want to move on to the next segment, you can use the Ctrl-U shortcut to go to the next untranslated segment, or you can just double click. So you can double click on any segment, even if it's translated already. So double clicking just moves you to any segment that you want, and you can edit it. But if you want to just move to the next untranslated segment, you may use this Ctrl-U shortcut. And if you want to move back, you would use Ctrl-Shift-U. So what about those translation memories and glossaries? So the translation memory will of course be created as you translate. So that translation memory file will be created for this translation. If you have some TMX files, translation memory files, you can put them in that TM folder and that file will be used. I can't really demonstrate it because I would need a file which has some translations related to the subject, which I don't. But we will look at using a glossary. So with the glossaries, the situation is similar. So it's similar but not the same, because if you want to add items to the glossary from here, so of course they will not be automatically added. You will need to select a given term. So for example, emergency services, and I right click and add glossary entry, and you can see I've got the source term and I'm typing in, so you have to manually just translate this term. I assume this is how it would be translated. You can also add a comment, and you can also see the path to this glossary file. So this is the file where those terms will be saved, right? Okay, so what happens if I go to this next segment now? You can see here that I've got this suggestion, this translation of the term appearing here, which I can use. So how would I use it? Of course, I could just type it in the translation, right? But another possibility, a quicker possibility, is to select this and press Ctrl space. And it doesn't seem to work. Okay, so I started typing and it gave me a suggestion here, which I can confirm. So I can press enter. Right? So this translation has been inserted. And of course, I would probably need to change the form, especially in Polish. I would need to change the form, maybe not in this particular sentence, but very often you will need to change the inflectional form, depending on which case the noun is in or the adjective is in. So I'm going to translate the second segment. Let me just zoom in a little bit so that you can see. And we will need to change the form, of course. If I translate it like this. Right, and then I can press Ctrl U to move to the next segment. So you can see that we've got the translation here. We can only see the translation after we've translated a given segment. But if we go back, of course, we see both the original and the translation in each case. Okay, so let's see how we can add an external glossary file. So I've got a file here, one of the files submitted in the Glossary project. So it's a spreadsheet file, a Microsoft Excel file, which I'm going to open. Okay, and this gets open in this application called Plan Maker, which is the equivalent of Microsoft Excel, and it works with Excel files. So we're going to use this glossary for the translation, but we will need to save this as a text file, a TXT file, with the terms being separated by tabs. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to get rid of any headings, titles, notes, and so on. So all we need are just the original terms and the translations, and that's it. Nothing else. So no extra columns, no extra rows. So for example, here, when I scroll to the left, there is this extra column, so we have to get rid of that as well. So let me first do that. And you have to be careful. You have to make sure that all these extra columns and rows are removed, because otherwise it will not work. So I'm going to delete the cells here, and I'm going to select all these rows, including this heading. So I have to click here on the left and delete cells, but I get a warning that the range contains a header row. I'm not quite sure about what that means exactly, but I know that I can right click on this. You've got this header row. It's got this special header function apparently. And I can select all these rows again, and I can delete the cells. Right, so there are no extra rows or columns at the top or on the left. But I also need to remove these notes or explanations or the grammar notes. Right, so that's all we need. And we don't have to worry about the formatting. So the important thing is that we've got one column with the original terms and one column with the translations. And that's it. So now I can go to File and Save As. And I'm going to save it as a text file, just a plain text file. And click OK. And if you see any options, the important thing is that it should be UTF-8, which is default here, which actually is Unicode. So you could also select Unicode, but with Unicode, you've got all those different types of Unicode, including UTF-8. So I'm not sure what you will see in Microsoft Excel when you export it, but there should be some kind of option for UTF-8 or Unicode, and you should be fine with that. And another important option is that the separator should be a tab. So this is default here, but you have this preview here, so you can actually see the data, right? So these are separated by tabs, but if I select, for example, a comma, you can see that all these items are separated by commas or spaces or semicolons or user defined, so you can even define your own separator. And that's because when you export this type of file, depending on the purpose, so depending on where you're going to use it, in what kind of application or system, those different applications work with different separators when you export this type of data. So I don't want to go into detail here, but the important thing is that these need to be separated by tabs. Then Omega T will work with this file correctly. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, and this has been saved. And I can actually close this. I don't need to save it because I don't need to save these changes to the spreadsheet. I can still keep the original, but the text file has been saved, right? So you can see it here. And if I open it, then you can see that it's just a list of these terms and translations separated by those tabs. Okay, so what we need to do now is to copy this file into the glossary folder. So this is the project folder. You can see first aid, and this is the project file that is opened when we open the project. And here are all the folders. So of course we're interested in this glossary folder, and you can see that we already have this glossary.txt file, which includes the glossary term translated or added while translating the text. So of course it will only contain this one translation that I saved there, right? So it's the same type of file, but we can have this external file which we create in another program, and we can just move it here to the glossary folder. So we also have this one, right? And because it's in this folder and because it's a text file with those pairs of terms, then Omega T will be able to use it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the project. I'm going to open Omega T again. And here I'm going to open the recent project and close. So you can see this is saved automatically. So I didn't even need to save the file. But you can see that, of course, I have this suggestion here because it comes from that one term glossary that I created. But if I continue, if I move to other segments, I'm double clicking to quickly move between the segments. And you will see that when I double click here in the glossary pane, this translation appears, right? Because it comes from that file we added, right? So whenever you see CPR in the original, you will see this translation suggested here. Okay. And you can see another term, right? So this is the heading with this anaphylaxis term, and that's translated because that term exists in that glossary created for the project, for our glossary project. Okay, so we can just continue, and of course we will see any terms that exist in the file. So there's another instance of anaphylaxis. Right, so you get the idea. So how do we insert those glossary suggestions? We can use the shortcut Control space when in the translation field. So for example, if I go here, we've got this term anaphylaxis. So in this sentence, this sentence starts with this term. So we've got this suggestion here in the glossary. So this is the first word. So I want the glossary translation inserted. So I press Control space and confirm with Enter. Okay. I will ignore this phrase in the brackets. I'll just continue translating. And so on. I want to focus on something else. You can see that we've got these tags. So if you remember from SmartCat, they were used to mark those words and phrases that had some special formatting, like italics, bold text, also hyperlinks, things like that. So we want to have the same formatting in the original and the translation. So they have the same function here. They are used to indicate that this phrase has some special formatting, and we want to indicate which phrase in the translation should receive that formatting, right? So this is of course the phrase, and we can use the same shortcut, Control space, so we can see that we have the suggestion. But if we press it again and again, so basically we can switch between these modes by using Control space, and here you can select these tags which correspond to the tags there. So I can just double click, and if this is selected, the the tags would be placed around this phrase. So before and after. Okay, so I haven't translated the whole document, of course, but after finishing your translation, what do? Of course, you need to save your translated document. So you can go to Project and select Create Translated Documents. The shortcut is Ctrl D. Right? And nothing seems to happen, but in the background, the translated document is saved in the target folder. And we can look at that. So this is the project folder. And the target folder. And here we see the translated document. And it doesn't look good. So there was a problem with the file for some reason. It hasn't happened to me before, so I don't understand what the problem was. I've now switched to my other computer, and here, well, I've lost a lot of the progress, but I've translated one segment here, and I've added the tags as well. So I'm going to try again to create translated document. And in the target folder, I've got the file, and it seems to work fine. So of course, most of the document is not translated. But if I go to that segment, you can see that I've got that segment translated here. And I also have a hyperlink. So the tags enabled Omega T to preserve the hyperlink. So it's a working link. If I hold Control and click, this will take me to the address.